Surveying a Vision, a conversation with Jason Estes. Good morning, Mr. Estes. Tell us a little about yourself.
I was born in 1817. I taught school as I grew up, and then I studied civil engineering and surveying. I surveyed with the railroads as they moved to the west, and then I progressed into surveying for county lines and roads. I married my wife, Sarah Sargent Estes, in 1842. Iowa Falls seemed like a good place to raise a family because of the river and the railroads. Sarah and I had a daughter, Abby, who was 11 when we came to Iowa Falls in 1855. She married pioneer doctor John Foster. Abby was named after her aunt Abigail, who died 2 years before Abby was born. I had a younger daughter, Mary, who died of diphtheria at 17 years of age. It was a terrible disease that seemed to strike down young people in their prime, and there was no vaccination in those days. All of my descendants are through the Foster family. The Foster family has a long heritage in Iowa Falls. There's pioneer Dr. John Foster, who married my daughter Abby, his only son Frank Foster, who was a photographer, a businessman, and a benefactor of Iowa Falls. We have Frank to thank for much of the wonderful pictures that remain. Frank's sons, Fred and John Foster. His daughter, Mildred Foster, who is my great-granddaughter. Mildred's daughter, Sue Crotty, who is my great-great-granddaughter. And Sue's cousin, Jan Foster, who is my other great-great-granddaughter.
Tell us about your businesses.
I and two partners purchased Samuel White's old mill and tore it down and rebuilt a new mill in 1857. The capstone still sits at the old city hall. We operated the mill several years before selling it to other investors. An amusing or interesting side note, depending on your viewpoint, is that when the original abstract for the property sale was done, my name was misspelled as Estelle with an L. For several years thereafter, every time any part of the property was transferred, an affidavit had to be sworn that Jason Estelle and I were the same person. Always get your abstracts exactly right. I sold 4.5 acres of my property for Union Cemetery. Both Sarah and Abby were on the original board. I sold the 4.5 acres to the ladies' social gathering for $40 an acre. About the only stipulations were they had to develop the property and fence it in and care for it. They had to make a payment within 3 months and pay the balance of the $180 within 12 months.
How did you get your land?
As a surveyor and an early pioneer, I was in a prime position to locate good land. Most of my land I bought directly from the United States government, other than the land I bought from Samuel White secondhand. I owned nearly 300 acres of land in Iowa Falls west of the river, on both sides of the river, north and south. I owned nearly all the residential property. I owned Elk Run, and I also owned Wildcat Glen. I owned the post office and Catholic church block where my house stood. I surveyed and developed Estes Park and specifically laid it out as a central park for the city. This is what the park looked like in those days with dirt roads. I laid out the central block for schools and Seminary Hill for college. Sarah and I had the finest brick and stone home in town at the time. Unfortunately, I died young at only 58 years of age. If I had lived to be 158 instead of just 58, I would have made some real money. Instead, I left Sarah as a widow for nearly 30 years. Our beliefs were Universalist. Sarah helped establish the Universalist Church in 1892, where the present-day Catholic Church now stands. The church was a going concern for many years until the minister began to get the parish involved in investing in gold mining schemes in Canada. The parish lost a great deal of money and never really recovered. The church was sold to the Catholics in 1905, a year before Sarah died. My fine brick home was torn down in 1914 to build the new post office. My home was built to last a lot longer than the 40 years it did.
What do you think of Iowa Falls today?
It makes me sad that Wildcat Glen no longer exists in the form that it did. There's no waterfall there. When my grandson Frank Foster provided the land to the city, he never intended for it to be used as residential development. But I guess that's progress. I'm also sad that the Central Block is no longer reserved for education and is in private hands. It makes me also a little bit discomforted to know that the river was dammed. It is nothing like the river that I knew. On the other hand, I'm glad a college was built on Seminary Hill and that it still exists today. I'm also glad that all the parks have been developed and are doing well.
Let's look at some of your land today.